When Serafina moved all my belongings onto the front lawn after forgetting to invite me to her wedding, I finally understood that some people enter your family not to join it, but to reshape it in their image. I'd watched my son Corwin fall in love with her 3 years after Meredith passed. Sierra was beautiful, ambitious, always holding that phone up to capture the perfect moment. I welcomed her into our Sunday dinners, helped with Luna's school projects, even co-signed papers when they needed help with the mortgage. The betrayal wasn't just the wedding invitation that never came or finding my father's toolbox sitting in the morning dew. It was the calculated way she erased me from their story, one family photo at a time, until I became the inconvenient widower who didn't fit her vision of their new life. I am Stellan Northwood, 76 years old, widower. Father to one son who used to call me every Sunday. The story I need to tell begins on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 years after I buried my wife Meredith. The maple tree in our front yard had turned the color of fire. I remember because I was looking at it through the kitchen window when I should have been looking at wedding invitations on the counter. But there weren't any. I had been living in the same house for 43 years. The house where Corwin took his first steps. Where Meredith hung Christmas stockings every December until the cancer took her voice, then her strength, then her breath. After she passed, the rooms grew larger, the silence heavier. Corwin started visiting more often in those first months. He would sit in Meredith's chair and we would talk about her garden, her recipes, the way she hummed while folding laundry. Then he met Serafina at some conference for his accounting firm. Sierra was 38, divorced. She had a daughter named Luna from her previous marriage, a quiet 8-year-old with dark eyes who reminded me of Corwin at that age. When he brought them for Sunday dinner, I set extra places and made Meredith's pot roast. Sierra smiled often, but her eyes were always calculating. She held her phone like other people hold rosaries. Constantly documenting moments, angles, lighting, she would rearrange our family photos on the mantel while I was getting dessert. Small changes, nothing I could complain about without sounding petty. The visits began changing, shorter. More structured, Sierra would suggest better restaurants than my cooking, more photogenic locations than my living room. When they did come, she would position everyone for pictures that somehow never included my chair, my corner of the table, my presence in their frame. I told myself I was imagining things. Grief makes you paranoid, makes you see abandonment in every shifted glance. Then Corwin called to tell me about the wedding. His voice was different, lighter. He was happy. Truly happy for the first time since Meredith's funeral. They were planning something intimate, he said, family only, small ceremony followed by a dinner reception. I waited for the details, the date, the location, my role in his special day. Instead, he talked about venues and photographers and how Luna would be the flower girl. When the call ended, I realized he had told me about the wedding without actually inviting me to it. But surely that was an oversight. A man doesn't exclude his only parent from his wedding, not intentionally. I started checking the mailbox twice daily. The mailman Jerry had known me for 15 years. He started giving me concerned looks when I would appear at the curb before he'd even turned onto our street. The invitation would come. It had to come. Meanwhile, Sierra's presence in my life grew more pronounced. She began arriving early for visits, walking through my house with the focused attention of someone taking inventory. She asked questions about my daily routines, my medications, whether I ever felt unsafe living alone. She suggested I might be happier somewhere with more social interaction. People my own age, professional care if I needed it. I found her business cards for assisted living facilities tucked into my magazine rack. Accidentally dropped, she claimed. The Sunday before the wedding, they came for what I now realize was meant to be a goodbye dinner. Sierra brought her camera equipment, professional lighting. She spent an hour positioning us for family portraits. In every shot, I was either excluded entirely or placed at the edge where I could be easily cropped out later. When I mentioned this, she laughed and said the lighting was better near the window, that I should trust her artistic vision. That night after they left, I sat in Meredith's chair and understood with sudden clarity that I was being erased. Methodically, deliberately, not through cruelty but through careful omission. The wedding invitation never came because it was never intended to come. On the day of the ceremony, I drove to the venue, a small restaurant downtown where Meredith and I used to celebrate anniversaries. I parked across the street and watched my son marry a woman who had decided his life would be better without me in it. Luna wore a white dress with ribbons in her hair. Corwin looked handsome in his navy suit. Sierra was radiant in cream-colored silk, holding her phone to capture every moment of their new beginning. I watched them pose for pictures in front of the restaurant, 3 generations of family, Sierra, Corwin, and Luna. The frame was complete without me. I drove home and sat in my empty house, surrounded by 43 years of memories that apparently had no place in my son's future. That was Tuesday. Thursday morning, I would discover just how thoroughly Sierra intended to edit me out of their story. Thursday morning began like any other. I woke at 6:30, made coffee in the pot Meredith bought for our 25th anniversary. Dressed in my good khakis and the blue shirt she always said brought out my eyes. I had a standing appointment every Thursday morning. The cemetery was a 20-minute drive through neighborhoods where I used to know every family name. Now there were young faces behind windows, children I had never met playing in yards where I once knew every dog's name. Meredith's headstone was simple granite. Her name, her dates, and the words, beloved wife and mother, carved in letters I had chosen while numb with grief. I brought fresh flowers every week. Yellow roses from the bush in our backyard that she had planted the year Corwin graduated high school. That morning, I told her about the wedding I had watched from across the street. How beautiful Luna looked, how happy Corwin seemed. I did not tell her about the invitation that never came. Some burdens are too heavy to place on the dead. I stayed longer than usual. The morning air was crisp with the promise of winter. Other visitors came and went. An elderly woman placing lilies on a grave 3 rows over. A middle-aged man who stood with his hands in his pockets, saying nothing to the stone that marked his loss. When I finally drove home, my street looked different. There was a cluster of cars in my driveway. Sierra's white SUV, a van I did not recognize, 2 men in work clothes standing on my front porch. My first thought was that someone had broken in, that I was the victim of some elaborate robbery. Then I saw my belongings. My father's recliner sat in the middle of the lawn, its worn leather dark with morning dew. The reading lamp that had stood beside it for 15 years was unplugged, its cord coiled neatly around its base. My books were stacked in cardboard boxes that were already softening with moisture. Everything. They had moved everything. The dining room table, where Meredith and I had eaten 30,000 meals together, was positioned near the mailbox. The chairs around it like we were expecting guests for an outdoor dinner party. My bedroom dresser stood open, drawers pulled out to display my folded shirts and socks to anyone who cared to look. 43 years of living. 43 years of accumulating memories and mementos and the simple objects that make a house a home. All of it arranged on my lawn like a yard sale that no one had asked me to organize. My toolbox sat near the front steps. The metal box my father had given me when I turned 18 and told me that a man needed to be able to fix what was broken. Inside were tools I had used to build Corwin's treehouse, to repair Meredith's garden gate, to hang pictures of our family on walls that were apparently no longer mine. I parked on the street because my driveway was blocked. I walked slowly toward my house, trying to understand what I was seeing, trying to make sense of how my private life had become a public display. Sierra emerged from my front door carrying a box of photographs. She was dressed in workout clothes, her hair pulled back efficiently. She looked like someone who had been working hard and was proud of her productivity. Behind her came one of the men I had seen on my porch. He carried my television, the old set Meredith and I had bought to watch the news together every evening. He set it carefully on the grass next to my coffee table. Sierra saw me and smiled, bright, confident. The smile of someone who believed she was doing a good deed. She walked over with papers in her hand, official-looking documents with letterheads I could not read from a distance. "Stellan," she said, and her voice was warm with false kindness. "Perfect timing. I was hoping to talk to you about next steps." Next steps. As if my entire life displaced onto my lawn was simply the first item on an agenda we had agreed to follow. She explained that she had found an excellent facility. Assisted living with activities and meal service, and people trained to help with medical needs. She had taken the liberty of filling out applications because she knew how overwhelming paperwork could be for someone my age. Someone my age, as if 76 meant incompetent. As if the accumulation of years had somehow erased my ability to make decisions about my own existence. She showed me brochures. Glossy photos of smiling elderly people playing cards and tending small gardens and gathering around communal dining tables. It looked pleasant enough. It also looked nothing like the life I had built with Meredith in the house where I had intended to die. "Where is Corwin?" I asked. "At work. He knows this is hard for you, but he agrees it's time. The house is too much for one person. You'll be so much happier around people who understand what you're going through." What I was going through. As if grief and age were the same thing. As if missing my wife meant I had lost my mind. I looked at my belongings scattered across the lawn. My neighbors' curtains twitching as they watched this strange theater playing out on their quiet street. Mrs. Patterson from next door stood openly at her window, not even pretending she was not staring. My humiliation was complete, my privacy destroyed. My life reduced to objects that could be moved without my permission by a woman who had decided she knew better than I did how I should live. The moving men continued their work, in and out of my house like ants dismantling something they had found in their path. They were efficient, professional. They treated my possessions with reasonable care. But they were not moving my belongings with my consent. They were executing someone else's plan for my future. I sat down on my porch swing. The swing I had built with Corwin when he was 12 and wanted to learn carpentry. We had hung it together, measuring twice and cutting once, just like my father had taught me. Now I sat on it surrounded by everything I owned, watching strangers carry away the contents of my life. I sat on that porch swing for 2 hours watching strangers dismantle my life. The moving men worked with the quiet efficiency of people who had done this many times before. They wrapped my dishes in newspaper, taped boxes shut, loaded furniture onto their truck with careful precision. Sierra supervised everything with her phone, taking photos of each room as it emptied, documenting the transformation for reasons I could not understand. Maybe she needed proof that she had successfully erased me. Maybe she was building evidence for some story she would tell later about doing what was best for everyone. At 11:30, Corwin's car pulled into the driveway. My son stepped out slowly. He wore his work clothes, but his tie was loose. His hair looked like he had been running his hands through it. He did not look at me sitting on the swing surrounded by cardboard boxes and displaced furniture. He walked straight to Sierra. They stood close together near my mailbox, speaking in voices too low for me to hear. Occasionally one of them would glance in my direction, but neither approached me. I was apparently a problem to be discussed rather than a person to be consulted. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. Sierra gestured toward the house, toward the moving truck, toward the papers she still carried. Corwin nodded occasionally, but his shoulders were tense. His hands stayed in his pockets like he was afraid of what they might do if he let them free. Finally, he walked over to me. "Dad," he said. I had not heard him call me Dad in 6 months. It was always Stellan now or nothing at all when he could avoid using my name entirely. "Son." He sat down on the swing beside me. The same swing where I had taught him to tie his shoes when he was 5. Where we had talked about girls when he was 15. Where he had told me about proposing to his college girlfriend who had said no and broken his heart before he met Meredith and understood what real love looked like. Now he sat there like a stranger who happened to share my last name. "This is hard," he said. "I know this is hard, but Sierra thinks it would be better if you had more support. People around all the time, activities. Medical staff if you need them," Sierra thinks. Not we think, not I think. Sierra thinks, and apparently that was enough to justify dismantling the home his mother had loved. "Did you know she was doing this today?" His silence was answer enough. "Did you know she excluded me from your wedding?" More silence. He stared at his hands, at the moving truck, at anything except my face. "Corwin, she said she sent an invitation. She said it must have gotten lost in the mail." Even he did not believe it. I could hear the doubt in his voice, but doubt was easier than confrontation. Easier than admitting his new wife had deliberately excluded his only parent from the most important day of his life. "Your mother would be ashamed." The words came out harder than I intended. But they were true, and truth sometimes cuts before it heals. He flinched like I had struck him. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were wet. "Mom is gone," he said. "We have to figure out how to live without her. Sierra is trying to help. She knows about these things. She went through this with her own grandmother." Her own grandmother. As if all elderly people were interchangeable. As if my specific life, my specific needs, my specific wishes were irrelevant details that could be managed by someone else's experience with someone else's family. She moved my belongings without asking me. "Dad, you can barely manage the house anymore. The yard work, the maintenance, all those stairs. What if you fell? What if something happened and nobody found you for days? What if?" The favorite phrase of people who want to control your life for your own good. What if you fell? What if you forgot something? What if you made a mistake? What if living meant taking risks that other people were not comfortable letting you take? "I have managed fine for 3 years. "Have you? Really? When was the last time you had the furnace serviced? When did you last see a doctor? You eat the same frozen dinners every night. You sit in that chair and watch television until you fall asleep." His voice was rising, frustration bleeding through the careful control he had been maintaining. This was not the conversation he had planned to have. This was messier than the clean narrative Sierra had prepared for him. "That is my choice." "It is not a choice when you are not taking care of yourself properly." We stared at each other. Father and son separated by 45 years and a fundamental disagreement about what it meant to live well. He saw decline and danger. I saw independence and dignity. A car door slammed. We both turned. Luna climbed out of Sierra's SUV wearing her school uniform, backpack over one shoulder, lunchbox in her hand. She was 9 now, a year older than when I had first met her. Taller, more serious. Still carrying that quiet watchfulness that reminded me of Corwin at that age. She stopped when she saw my belongings spread across the lawn. Her eyes moved from the dining room table to the television to the boxes of books stacked near the street. "Why is Grandpa Stellan's stuff outside?" she asked. Sierra appeared beside her immediately. protective, controlling the narrative before it could develop in directions she had not approved. Remember we talked about how Grandpa is going to live somewhere new, somewhere with lots of friends and people to take care of him? Luna looked confused. She walked over to my father's toolbox and touched its metal surface. Are you having a garage sale? The innocence of the question cut deeper than any accusation could have. In her world, when someone's belongings appeared on their lawn, it meant they were for sale. It meant someone was getting rid of things they no longer wanted. No, sweetheart, I said, I am not having a garage sale. Then why is everything outside? Sierra stepped forward. Luna, honey, we talked about this. Grandpa is moving to a place where he will be happier. But he looks sad, out of the mouths of children, the truth spoken without calculation or agenda. I looked sad because I was sad. Because my life was being dismantled by people who claimed to love me. Luna walked over to the porch swing and climbed up beside me. She was small enough to fit in the space between Corwin and me, her legs swinging freely because her feet did not touch the ground. I do not want you to move away, she said. And there it was. The words that made this betrayal complete, not just the exclusion from the wedding or the disposal of my belongings or the assumption that I could not manage my own life. They were taking me away from Luna, and taking Luna away from me. Luna's words hung in the afternoon air like a prayer I had been afraid to speak myself. I do not want you to move away. Simple truth from a 9-year-old who had not yet learned that adults could justify anything if they used the right words. Sierra moved quickly to retrieve Luna from the swing. Honey, remember what we talked about. Grandpa will be happier with people his own age. You can visit him whenever you want. But Luna pulled back. She pressed closer to me on the swing, her small hand finding mine. He does not look happy now. Luna, come here please. Sierra's voice carried an edge I had not heard before, the voice of someone whose control was slipping. I want to stay with Grandpa. This is not up for discussion. And there it was. The truth beneath all the gentle explanations and careful justifications. This was not up for discussion because Sierra had already decided. She had made her choice and expected everyone else to comply. I looked at my son. At the man I had taught to ride a bicycle and drive a car and treat people with respect. He sat beside me on the swing we had built together, watching his wife manage his family like employees who needed clearer direction. Corwin, I said quietly, walk with me. We left Luna on the swing, her legs still swinging freely, her eyes watching the moving men load my television into their truck. Sierra stayed close to her, probably worried about what other uncomfortable truths might come from a child who had not yet learned to lie for the convenience of adults. We walked to the backyard. To Meredith's garden, where her roses were preparing for winter. The blooms were smaller now, darker, but still beautiful in the way that things are beautiful when they are ending. Your mother planted these the year you graduated high school, I said. I remember. She said she wanted something that would outlast us, something that would keep growing after we were gone. Corwin stood with his hands in his pockets, the same pose he had held as a teenager when he knew he was in trouble but did not want to admit it. She also said something else. She said family was not just about love, it was about respect, about seeing each other as whole people, not as problems to be solved. Dad, I know this is hard, do you? Do you know what it feels like to come home and find your entire life arranged on your lawn? To discover that your only child has decided you are no longer capable of making decisions about your own existence. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was smaller than it had been all day. Sierra says you are not safe here alone. Sierra says, when did what Sierra says become more important than what I say about my own life? She has experience with this. Her grandmother went through the same thing. I am not her grandmother, I am your father, the man who raised you, the man who taught you right from wrong. Does that count for nothing? I walked over to my tool shed. The small building I had constructed myself 20 years ago to store the lawn equipment and tools I used to maintain the home Meredith had loved. The movers had not touched it yet, probably because Sierra had not thought to inventory its contents. I opened the door and retrieved a metal file box from the shelf where I kept important papers, documents I had not looked at in months but had never forgotten. Insurance policies and tax records and other official proof of the life I had built through 43 years of marriage and work and careful planning. There is something Sierra does not know, I said. Corwin watched me open the box. Inside were manila folders organized with the precision Meredith had always admired. Bills paid on time, contracts honored, promises kept. I found the folder I was looking for and pulled out a sheaf of papers. Legal documents with official letterheads and notarized signatures. The paperwork from 3 years ago when Corwin and Sierra had needed help with their down payment. When you bought your house, you needed a co-signer. Someone with good credit and steady income to guarantee the loan. I handed him the papers, watched his face change as he read his own signature next to mine. as he remembered the conversation we had in the same backyard when he had asked for help, and I had said yes without hesitation because that is what fathers do for sons they love. I am not just a co-signer, Corwin, I am a co-owner. My name is on the deed. My money helped buy your home. For 3 years, I have been making payments when your salary was not enough to cover the full mortgage. The papers shook slightly in his hands. The weight of what he was reading, the implications of what Sierra had not bothered to research before she decided to relocate me. She does not know this. Apparently not. Or she would have realized that forcing me into assisted living might create complications for your living situation. We stood in Meredith's garden surrounded by roses that would bloom again next spring if someone remembered to care for them. Father and son facing each other across a divide that had opened slowly over months and was now impossible to ignore. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to be treated like a person instead of a problem. I want to be included in decisions about my own life. I want my granddaughter to know that I exist and that I love her. And if Sierra cannot accept that," I looked at the house where I had planned to live until I died. At the garden Meredith had planted for the future. At the yard where Luna played when her parents brought her to visit. "Then she can buy me out of your mortgage and I will find somewhere else to live. Somewhere I can make my own choices about my own life. Somewhere I am welcomed instead of tolerated." Corwin folded the papers carefully, put them in his jacket pocket like evidence he needed to preserve. "I will talk to her." "No. We will talk to her together, right now." We walked back to the front yard where my life was still scattered across the lawn like artifacts from an archaeological dig. Sierra was taking pictures of Luna sitting in my recliner, probably for some social media post about family memories. I cleared my throat. "Sierra, we need to discuss some things you may not be aware of." She looked up from her phone. Smiled that bright, confident smile that had fooled me for 3 years into thinking she had my best interests at heart. "Of course, Stellan, what can I help you understand?" "You can help me understand how you plan to make your mortgage payments after I withdraw my financial support." The smile faltered. Just slightly, but enough for me to know that the balance of power in our relationship had just shifted in ways she had never considered possible. "I think," I continued, "it is time we had an honest conversation about what respect looks like in this family.